See. All right, we are here. Hello, hi Jessica.
Hi, Peter. How
Hey,
are you?
doing well. Do you have anything to? Are you drinking anything?
I am. I
Oh,
have
nice.
a caramel macchiato.
Oh,
Keurig drink. My Keurig was treating me today.
cool. I just drank my coffee, and I don't know if you heard that, but I just poured water in this mug, and now I'm drinking water. so,
Water's
so complex.
good. It's needed. It's needed.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Well, we're yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say I probably don't drink enough of it. So there you go.
Oh, yeah. I think very few people do. What is it? Is it eight? Is it 8 cups or 10? I always forget. Or is it
I think
dependent
it's
on your
8.
BMI? Yeah. What's that?
Yeah, but I feel like they always just say like drink as much as you can.
Okay. And
But
if
I
you drink,
don't know. I
yeah,
don't trust me, listeners, on that fact.
yeah, I
Doctor.
know. Supposedly you can get drunk if you drink it super fast, like within like a whole gallon. You could also die, I think, too. So yeah, always be
Oh,
careful. Don't die
okay.
from water, y'all. Don't let me be a bad influence.
No
But
tugging.
no. Well, today we're going to be talking about when to leave or when to stay. When it seems like only one person is actually doing the work. So we're both marriage counselors. We both see a lot of couples. We have had a lot of couples that I'm sure we've had in the
Mhm.
past 10, 15 years we've been doing this work where we have seen kind of feels like maybe just one person's doing a lot of the work. So
Really?
yeah, what are some characteristics that you often see? How you notice that? Because I would say right now that's probably a general complaint, but that's not always true. In fact, sometimes that can be set up as if it's true, and then that's why I like to get to know both sides of the story. A common occurrence, like just in a heterosexual home, traditional home, maybe she feels like he does absolutely none of the work at home, and then I get to know him a lot more, and I get to hear his side of the story. He would say, "Well, I work 30 hours more at my work because I don't feel allowed to come home and even be a parent. So I make more money for my family." So she's, I don't want to say set him, has set the narrative as if he doesn't help, but from his perspective, he's quote not allowed to help. And so in there, I try to help them both like be more flexible. But there are nevertheless cases that I think you and I can think of where he's just checked out, like he's not contributing, or she's just not contributing. So what are some things, just to get that out of the way, like once we see that, what does that look like? What does that look like for you, maybe?
So I think really like one of the things that I look for is there's a few. One being because I think there's sorry, I know I'm a little all over, but I'll start here. I think there's a large misconception that relationships end in fire, right? That it's gonna look some relationships may definitely have those four horsemen galloping around a lot more, but it's there's still that emotional responsiveness. And I think what I get more scared of and what's been shown in the research is that more relationships end in ice, right? That's kind of like the death knell of a relationship is when there just isn't, there's such an indifference that sets in, that loss of motivation to even collaborate. And I think in that loss of motivation, sometimes there's also just a loss of care or desire to even understand anymore the other person's side. And that I think is a point where if someone has feels that level of indifference, then there's no collaboration anymore. And I think
Mm,
you need that collaboration in order to create a meaningful change. And I think the Gottmans referred to when even when all warning signs or predictors are are present in a relationship, if both couples are willing to work on the relationship 75% of the time, I hope I get that statistic accurate, they're able to turn it around. So I think that's why motivation for me and that indifference are so critical.
yeah.
Because otherwise your needs aren't going to get met
Yeah.
in a relationship, you
What would
know?
you say is like, yeah, and what often leads them there, and what do you often say, or has it always been the case? I mean, I will sometimes see that substance abuse will lead that
Ooh,
one
yeah.
partner not to work as much. In fact, that's pretty common. And
Mhm.
you think of the ramifications of excessive pot smoking, for example, or just excessively, or definitely excessive alcoholism is going to really change your behavior. Are there, I guess, other extraneous factors I could see that that come into play? Could be a death of a child, that really just kind of does, it does a lot of damage psychologically, which I can't imagine, and one person just decides to check out. So maybe there's that. So there's a lot of different reasons why somebody is going to fully check out, and not always because the other one's just a bad partner. I guess that's what's also kind of interesting, because it brings, now that I think about it, it brings a lot more complexity, So do you see
Yeah.
certain other things as well, that why that would occur? Or
Yeah, like I think looking just, across and to pick a few, one is I think over somewhere along the way, people can stop, or maybe they just haven't never um, verbalized what they need, right? And so, in some ways, you expect your partner to be a mind reader. And then, when those needs get met, and that happens over like this long period of time, you feel lonely, you feel disconnected. And it's like you weave this narrative of that person just doesn't care. And the longer you hold on to that narrative and it solidifies and it calcifies, that's a lot harder to break down. Because then when you come into therapy, there's this years upon years worth narrative. And at what point do you just believe that to be true? And so I think when
mm,
people kind of convince themselves, like, oh, this person just doesn't care, or my needs aren't getting met, now the relationship doesn't feel either like a safe space or a fulfilling space.
yeah,
Um,
right.
and also, I think sometimes early on in relationships, people, and this one I'm kind of wavering on, but I think it's still important, is I think people fall in love with this idea of potential versus accepting for somebody who they actually are. So when that potential isn't fulfilled, it's kind of like, well, you know, uh,
Hmm.
but it was never necessarily there. So I think being really clear is important too. And what are my expectations out of the gate? What are my needs out of the gate? And making sure over time you articulate what those are.
Hmm.
So that stopping kind of turning towards, as Gottman calls it, the bids,
Yeah.
making more, this is a big one. I feel like when you start to just kind of cast these negative judgments,
Hmm.
like, or talk negatively about your partner when they're not there, or to other people, when you start to seek either emotional or physical needs even from outside of the relationship, I think all those things indicate the relationship is no longer a safe space, or a space where you feel like you can confide or you can turn to. And I think all of those things add up over
Yeah.
time.
Well, like how you said, okay, so yeah, I like how you,
That was a
and
lot.
yeah, no, because I wanted to, at first I was going to say, well, I'm going to not, yeah, I was going to, let's challenge this a little bit, because there was like, okay, if I do these, then my partner will somehow get better. And then I like how you ended it with, if that's still not there, maybe this is maybe where your relationship's at. Because I know a lot of people they would get frustrated if I say, okay, let's try soft startup. Let's try to use I statements instead of you statements. And they'll just like, look, Peter, I tried everything and there's nothing that's working. And
Mhm.
I could hear they're just exasperated, and just, they're so
Yeah.
tired. Um, so maybe with the litmus test, I think that we should probably just look at, I mean, we talk a lot about bids for connection,
Mhm.
and I think you can know that you're likely doing a significant amount of work if you feel like you're the only one that's offering bids. And you could even see that on an objective level. The reason why that's not good is because you're going to also be the one that's going to have the most amount of contempt in the relationship. And if you have the most amount of contempt in the relationship, you're going to be trying to motivate the relationship from a really bad place, because the place that you're coming from emotionally is the place of disgust. So
Mhm.
you've put that person in a no-win situation. If you just
Yeah.
see disgust in the pandemic, for example, are you clean or are you dirty? Well, you're clean supposedly, but can you get a test? But I'm not sure if you're still clean. Can you get another one? So our mindsets were kind of like that for the last 3 years, 2 years or whatever. You do that in a marriage, that's not good, especially if you come from a place of disgust. Are you on my side, or you really aren't on my side? Okay, you're on my side. Well, let's see if you do this, this, and this. I'm not sure if you really are. So if you're coming from a place of disgust, it's not going to motivate your partner. So you want to be able to state your needs and feelings in a very clear way. We want you to be actually stop being so darn nice if you're the only one doing all the work in the relationship, because that's probably causing more harm than good, because you're coming now from a place of contempt, which is not good. So we want you to actually be very direct, not mean, not aggressive, but direct. And so we want you to say, hey, I feel really overwhelmed right now because you've been on the television or you've been watching TV, okay, for the past 3 hours. I need you to help with the kids right now. I know that sounds aggressive or whatnot, maybe for your marriage, but it is a whole lot better than holding on to so much contempt and bitterness and bitterness. And then all of a sudden the next, like, maybe it's not the next day. And just to let you know, if you're holding on to that, that's doing a lot of damage to your heart. Gottman talks quite a bit about the damage it can do. Cardiovascular diseases will often come from a lot of contempt, and even put people in the grave 15 years, before their predicted lifespan. So you want to express, that's what, for your own heart, for your own life, you want to get to the point where you state to your partner, hey, I feel this about what's going on. I need you from this. And so, yeah, I mean, but if your partner still doesn't act and you're still doing all the work, then I guess, where do we go from there? Do we tell them to, what do we say? Where do you, what's the next step? Do you just get out? And then their response is gonna be like, well, yeah, it's easy for you to say. I mean, he brings in the paycheck, or she homeschools the kids, or she brings in the money, or whatever. I mean, where do you go from there if you really are the only one doing work and you're being direct, but there's still no reciprocity?
That is so hard. And you're right. There's so many other contextual things to consider there. But I agree, that contempt, it's so damaging, and it's something that over time, what will happen if that just goes unchecked, or if I continue to feel like my needs are not, if not think, but if my needs in actuality are not being met, then I think you also have to think about the larger cost, which is, yes, could it be challenge? I'm not saying it's not challenging to leave that. It is, and I think there are so many investments that happen over time where you create shared investments. So financially, the living situation, if you have a family or a pet, right? You have so many things that get entangled. However, it's also been shown that if there's volatility, or if there is that tension in the household, that negatively impacts kids. I think I hear oftentimes that we have to stay until the kids leave for college. And it's like, but let's think about what could happen. The research shows it can create more truancy for kids. It can result in test scores getting lowered. Just emotional behavioral um, responses from kids. I mean, I think,
If you stayed in the marriage, even though the other person's not working, that's what you're referring to. Yeah. And can
yeah.
you explain truancy for our listeners? I know what that means, but truancy
Oh, yeah.
is, yeah.
Sorry. When a child, hopefully I'm getting this right, Peter, but when a child refuses to go to school.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I knew. Yeah, I was going to help. That's perfect.
Thank
I
you.
could always see like some listener. If we have some of y'all in like Idaho, welcome. For you listeners in Idaho. I don't know. We want to. I'm sure people from Idaho know what truancy means as well. Like, anyway, keep going.
No, I appreciate that. And so I think the conversation becomes then, yes, it's not going to be an easy conversation. It's not even going to be necessarily a quick process. But if you're at that point, then how do we then start talking? How do we leave this relationship with dignity and and go through these things together? I think that's
I
the
love that.
turning
Yeah.
to therapy.
Mm.
Sometimes I think therapy in some ways becomes this place where we have to fix the relationship. We have to save the relationship. And
Mm.
I think how at least I approach it is, it also needs to be a space where if couples come to that juncture in the road and they say we have to go down our different paths, then we need also a safe space to facilitate those conversations and also manage any grief that's coming up, and to support people in that decision.
Yeah. Now, when
Closing.
you say safe space, can you clarify in that? I always like to say secure rather
Ooh,
than
I like that.
safe.
I
The
like
reason why, and it's not so much nitpicking, it's just that safe space. I always just think of like the 18-year-old college kid who's never been challenged by his philosophy professor, and now he's getting triggered. And I'm like, there's always a pushback part in me. I'm like, okay, that doesn't need to be a safe space for that 18-year-old. He does need to be challenged, and he does like, okay. But I like to use secure space, because what secure space is
I
like,
love that.
I have the right to disagree with you, and that doesn't mean I'm somehow at fault. Like,
True.
a secure bond. Like, I love you, I'm not going anywhere, and we're going to take some risks. And that's a secure space, because in some of these relationships, you really do need to hash some stuff out, and it's not going to seem safe in the beginning, but it's going to be secure. Especially if there's some serious infidelity, or there's like substance abuse, or if like he's just refusing to work, or she's refusing to provide any type of support. Like, we're gonna have to have a real come to Jesus, session here. And it's not gonna be safe in the sense that it's gonna be like comfortable. And so, but
Yeah.
can we also provide a place of security that I'm going to work on my trust, and then I'm also going to work on my commitment? But I want to back up a little bit, because even those couples that aren't even there yet, like, how do they get there? And that's why I love what you're saying about just being, I mean, because about just being, when you're talking about like being direct and just stating your boundary in the very beginning, kind of
Yeah.
like what you're saying earlier. Enough use those same words, but I think about, like, when it comes to assertiveness, like, why we want y'all to be assertive and to state your boundaries is because it immediately establishes trust in the other person too, and it lets them make a decision on what they really want to do in the relationship. So if you're doing all the work in the relationship, I guess I would ask you, what's keeping you in, and what are
Yes.
you getting out of it? And do you really want that other person to step and do half the load? And before you say yes, I want you to really, really slow down this weekend and really think about that answer, because I can think of a few people, like, it comes right to mind, that if they really gave 50% to the other person, they would be having a really, really, really hard time with it. So, have you created a situation where you are doing 100% of the work, and it's impossible for you to give that other person even 10% of the work? And if that's the case, then I want you to, one, acknowledge that, and number two, try to get help where you can let go of that sense of control, because that's a you issue. That's not a relationship issue. And if I could comfort you, that's actually really good news. So it's no longer a testimony of the marriage being bad. And nor am I saying you're bad. I get it. Like, relationships are all about overcompensation. I understand it didn't start that way. And this is how we met people, like, in high school. I could think of like friends I met in high school who are like super relaxed, or one was super intense, and they're like radically different people. Like, the really relaxed person I'm thinking of, she became super intense. I'm like, sweetie, go smoke a little weed or something. What's going on with you? And it's because she's in this overcompensated relationship. And I get it. Like, I understand, like, you didn't want to be here, but I guess I should say that you should always start with, do you really want to give a little control? And if you don't, then try to get help for that. However, on a different type of relationship, if this person's not doing any work and you've been really clear, are you willing to take the next step in your boundary and saying, you know what, this isn't working for me, and I need to step away, and I'm gonna and the reason why I'm gonna step away, not because I'm coming from a place of judgment, because I think a lot of people have a hard time with boundaries because they're seeing relationships in this vertical pattern. They look down upon them. Why aren't you where I'm supposed to be? And they come from a place of a lot of anger. And what I often help with clients is like, see things horizontally. And it's like, don't judge. And what I mean by that, it's like, judge according to what your standards are. And if somebody doesn't want to meet you, you're not seeing them as flawed, but you're respecting their no's, so that
Yeah.
you can release yourself from that person in a way that doesn't provide any guilt or shame inside of yourself, which is what you need.
Mhm.
And so what you're doing is, Johnny, it really looks like I think I love that you work so hard, but I've seen your decisions, that you've really made the decision, and I'm not judging this, to not invest at all with our kids. And you've even admitted that. And I appreciate you working so hard. I would like to be with somebody moving forward that wants to really invest in the children that I have and for the rest of their lives. And I'm going to respect the fact that you may want to invest all of your career, all of your energy in your career. And I respect that. I need someone that is going to provide some type of comfort and security for our children. So I'm going to move forward. The reason why that's so powerful is that it now gives this guy a choice to exactly what he's doing, what he's admitted to, or what she's doing, what she's admitted to. And it leaves them in a place that they will now have to be accountable to what decision they want to make in their lives without somebody putting them in a place of a vertical relationship, without the shame, without the guilt, and just these are the actions you're doing. What would you like to do with it? I'm going to choose to go over here. I can't tell you the number of men, especially men, who really just transform like that when that boundary's set like that. And so I always encourage my female clients in heterosexual relationships, when you get there, I'm not promising you he will change, but I'm saying you have about a 50% chance that he will.
Yeah.
But you don't do it because he'll change. That's the trick, because then he can sense that. You do it because you really believe it. And I can't tell you the number of times where when you're confronted with that type of decision, those people really do need to make a decision here. And they need to say, you know what? Either he says, yeah, you're right, and I can't do it anymore, I'm going to keep investing. Or he's going to say, oh my gosh, what am I about to lose? So never be afraid to be assertive, y'all. That's what I would say. It's just because when you do, that person immediately is able to trust you again. Because when you're truly assertive, I'm able to actually, for the first time, let go of my own resistance and hear what you have to say. So not to talk too long, but I love what I just wanted to add on, because you were saying some really good stuff that I wanted to.
Yeah. I love what you're saying though. And please call me out if I'm adding too much additional meaning to it. But it takes me back to a little bit when we were talking about compromise in a previous podcast, because I think that assertiveness that you're describing is also really making people connect to where is there any flexibility in this? Who am I as a person? What are my core beliefs? Like, what's part of my core identity and who I am and what I value? And that it's non-negotiable versus where is there room for flexibility? And I think at that point, if there's no flexibility and this is just something where we are so incompatible, we cannot build any type of bridge, then that's a moment where we're recognizing that. But it's also kind of forcing to think about, like, where am I in this? Is there room? Is there something where I'm not jeopardizing who I am as a person? Like you said, it's not about changing who you are, but it's figuring out where can I also meet my partner and still be myself.
Yeah. Nice.
So I love what you were saying. And I think I'm also going to borrow that secure space more often, because I love that.
The darn colleges, they've ruined safe space for me. I wouldn't have had a problem 5 years ago.
Well,
universities. I'm just joking. Well, because I think, yeah, and it's not to nitpick. It's just more. It's like, anyway. I'm teaching intro psych, and I love the concept of secure bond, because the more I research it, it's really, at the end of the day, it's you're there and you have the freedom to fail. You could do both, and I just, there's so much shame in relationships, mainly because the ideal is often so high, and we're so, we don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to take risks in a good way. Like, when I say risks, like, we're going to kind of get to the bottom of some of our disagreements without seeing that your disagreements are somehow like an indicator that you're somehow not caring to me, or that you're somehow a flawed person. And that may take me a while to get there. And we don't naturally go that way, because I think we naturally do assume that my way is better. I know I am. I mean, I immediately will often go to judgment, and I'm free to admit that, which is, you and I were talking about the need for why we go to therapy. And like, we actually need therapists as well, because I need therapy. Yeah, because I need therapy, because I have a tendency to allow that judgmental part to dominate, and I don't want that judgmental part to dominate. So I think we all, have that capacity, and that sometimes can be good, and sometimes it's just not. So, anyway, it's just good to recognize that your differences doesn't mean that person's somehow a flawed person, and especially if you see like a saver versus spender and all these other things.
Yeah.
But I guess all we could say for people that feel like it's all you're doing all the work, I guess I would ask a reflective question, and just,
Mm.
do you really want to give? And if you do, cool. But if you really see yourself as resisting to those recommendations, I actually would encourage you to be as brutally honest with yourself as possible, because that's actually much better. You're in a better boat, if I can encourage you. Because if you're I've been there. I think some of us have all been there where we've had to learn to let go of control. And you can do that. You can do that really well. And after you've learned to do that, and then you still reassess the relationship, see how it is. That's where my encouragement will be. However, if you've done that and you're still at the place where this person or she or he is just not changing, then I would say state your boundary that very clear way, and I guess at that point that's your decision. I'm not going to encourage you. I don't encourage people to divorce ever. I just like, what do you want to do? Yeah, I don't know if you had anything to add on that. I mean, that's yeah. So
I love that reflection, and
hmm,
just thinking about it, and hopefully this fits here, is just I think for both of you to think about, what's the type of relationship that we envision that we want to have. And to
hmm,
be able to kind of just self-reflect on that and come together, and where are our visions similar, where are they different? And where they're different, are there things that we can do to support one another in those needs, again, without jeopardizing your sense of self?
hmm,
Or maybe you'll discover that this is where there's that inflexibility, and this is something where it's getting you to reflect on, okay, well, if this is really what I want, is this a space where where we're going to be able to have these needs fulfilled? Is this a context? Is this a space where we will be able to achieve that? And
hmm,
is there a willingness on both parts to make that vision come to fulfillment in some way, shape, or form?
hmm,
And I think too, and when it comes to vulnerability, I would also pay attention to, is in this relationship, can I be vulnerable? Because
hmm,
if I'm like, when you were talking about flaws, that just really resonated with me, because I kept thinking, if I'm in a space where I don't feel accepted for who I am as a person,
hmm,
then I imagine also I'm going to be really hesitant to be vulnerable. And what would that be like, to be in a space where I cannot fully be myself, or I don't feel comfortable to fully be myself, or that,
hmm,
I can't confide in this person that I chose to potentially walk through life with, let's say in a situation where we're married. Um, that I think is also something to consider. And what do I need to be able to let that guard come down and to feel secure enough to be vulnerable?
hmm,
And
hmm,
is that possible here? Are we
yeah,
both willing to create that space for both of us to get to
hmm.
however you both define vulnerability,
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's yeah. I like that you said, because that's, as Sue Johnson would say. I mean, that's the biggest risk that we could take, and I think it's the scariest thing. That it's often the scariest for most of us, especially if we haven't been raised in a secure relationship, where we don't even know what that looks like. We don't even know what that is. If we're raised in a very anxious household, or avoidant household, or a household where there's a lot of ambiguity and inconsistency. One minute mom's giving me a big hug, next minute she's hitting me for no apparent reason. So it's like, if you come from that, it's going to be very difficult to know what that is and to let your guard down.
Mhm.
Well, if I let my guard down, how do I know they're not going to attack me? That's there's a
Awesome.
lot of there's a lot of people that I think a lot of us are, they get hurt, and not to include like the friendships that you invest in, and that people that you invest in at work, or it could be church leaders that you really, really put a lot of hope in, or maybe your rabbi or whoever it is, and then you felt like they really hurt you, and that could do damage. And so when you get to a point when you're in your 30s and your 40s, I'm in my 40s now, you got some scars. So you're not at a place like, and I get this about my clients. I have so much compassion for those clients who just like, I can't get to that place where I just let somebody in like that. I'm like, man, I have so many parts of myself that are like, man, I relate to you, buddy. I really, really do. I just like, and I try to help them in that process because it is hard. It is, especially with somebody that has literally seen you naked physically and psychologically to do
Yeah.
that all the time, and it ain't easy, especially. And so, I guess, um, and I think that's why I just love the Gottman stuff because it just keeps things so clear.
Yes.
And it just takes a lot of the burdens that away. But I mean, hopefully this episode was helpful for y'all. I would love to hear your comments. We've seen last week we had a good amount of people that looked at our show, which we're really excited about. But we need to, yeah. So we would love for you to, yeah. Also, if you feel if you want to improve your relationship, Jessica and I have designed courses. If you go to our website, andersonfamtherapy.com, and look at courses, we got a membership that people can every month, about maybe $10 more than a copay, listen to all of our courses online. We've got some really great material there as well. Well, all right. You want to do this again? Drink some treats? Okay. Okay. Oh, well.
Here, I want to stay.
Yes. Right. Hey, it's almost 12 o'clock. Bring out the margaritas. So next time, keep doing this in the morning. All right. Well, thanks for listening, y'all. And I hope you enjoy the weekend. You want to say anything? Any last words?
Yeah, no, I hope you all took something away. And same, like if you leave comments or however that, I'm not as tech savvy here, but I would love to hear whether it be about training ideas, things you potentially want more information about, or for us to talk about on the podcast. I would really love to hear from people about kind of things that they're navigating that they think would be helpful for us to talk about.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Maybe next time we should do this as a live show on Instagram and Facebook and see if we can get some live audience members. That'd be kind of fun.
That would be fun.
Yeah, maybe even on TikTok too. I think we could do live on TikTok as well. So that'd be kind of cool. All right. Yeah. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye.